Hi friends, welcome back to Oracle Aura, a place where we discuss all different types of holistic, natural, and spiritual methods of self-improvement. My name is Jada and I will be your host today. So today we have a guest. She is a beautiful soul and her name is Chrissy Dee. Chrissy is a full-time intuitive business coach who helps lightworkers come alive in their purpose and gain all the confidence, energetic tools, and business strategy needed to carry out their soul's work for a living. She's also a certified life coach who helps her clients overcome, struggle, and find more joy in many areas of their lives. So Chrissy really helps people tap into their higher purpose and move past their fears and the obstacles that they face in order to bring their soul's purpose to fruition. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. So I've asked Chrissy to come here today to talk about getting out of your comfort zone, because that's something that so many of us struggle with, right? We want to just live in these comfortable little bubbles and never move out of that. But as you'll hear me say later on in this episode, we have to go out on a limb because that's where all the fruit is. So Chrissy offers one-on-one life and business coaching packages, as well as workshops and courses to help you create big magic in your life too. And we will talk later in this episode about where you can find Chrissy. Also, in order to keep this podcast ad-free, I've decided to hop on Patreon. So starting in February, I will have all kinds of goodies for you guys on there. I'll have daily moon phase inspired journal prompts, a private community where you guys can talk about spiritual healing in your path. I'll have workshops, meditations, EFT sessions, all that good stuff. So if you'd like to get in on the goodness, hop over to patreon.com/oracleaura, just like it's spelled in this podcast, and you can get access to all those things. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Chrissy. How are you?
Hi, Jada. I'm doing great this morning. How are you?
I'm good. I am so excited to be talking to you. We've been following each other on Instagram for a little while now.
Yes.
So when I messaged you, and asked you to be on the podcast, I asked what was coming up for you recently. What are the lessons that you've been learning recently? And what has your focus been on? And it seemed that the main topic was kind of like getting out of your comfort zone and overcoming limiting beliefs, overcoming fears, which is what you talk about a lot in your content on Instagram. So, I would really love to just dive into that today and get into how you've come out of your comfort zone and how you help other people come out of their comfort zones.
Great. Yeah. And thank you, first of all, for having me on. And I'm super happy to explore this topic more with your audience because it's something really that is so important to talk about. And a little background on me, I'm an intuitive business coach for spiritual entrepreneurs and light workers. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot of soul growth and a lot of self development that comes along with growing a business. And even if you have something that you're passionate about that you just want to share online, there's so much that can come up for us in that process. And I really specialize in helping, my audience and my clients with empowerment, especially while getting out of their comfort zone and taking those brave actions and doing like a soul dive, so to speak, within their own experience and discovering more about themselves and their purpose here. So it really is something that I see so many people struggling with, not only the actions of getting out of their comfort zone and exploring and being, adventurous in their lives, but then working through and overcoming and kind of being best friends with those fears that come up, because that's the fastest and easiest way that we can really move on in our empowerment.
Love that. So before this episode, I actually just released an episode about manifesting.
Yes.
And one of the things I say in that episode is that confronting your fears is less like confronting the scary monsters under the bed and more like singing the child to sleep who's afraid of the
Ooh,
scary monsters under the bed.
I
And
love that.
yeah, and like it really is that way because so many times our fears come up and we kind of just bypass them and say, nope, don't want to deal with that. But then they intensify.
Yes, and they tend to show up in our lives when we're not even thinking about them really. Like we could say have this desire within our hearts and we start taking actions in line with that desire, and that starts bringing up these fears that a lot of the time we didn't even know was there, and then we're confronted all of a sudden with what do we do here? Do we take a few steps back and go back into our comfort zone where it feels safe and where it feels comfortable, or do we continue to push forward? And I think what trips a lot of people up is they don't necessarily see that higher level vision of what's behind the fear, right? And what our lives can look like once we overcome. And it is, it can be a very scary and confronting experience to be in that transformation, like in the midst of working through fears and doubts and insecurities. But we have to trust that on the other end of that, and it's not going to last forever. That's something, you have to make that promise to yourself that it's not going to last forever. And the feelings of accomplishment and self love and excitement that comes on the other end of these experiences that can be quite painful is unlike any other high. Have you had the same experience?
I have had the experience with feeling like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, as soon as I start doing something, then I question, honestly, even with this podcast.
Yep, I was just gonna say, I bet you've had that
Yeah.
experience with this very platform that we're talking on right now, your podcast.
Yes. Like, for the first, so before this was Oracle Aura podcast, it was Vivid Vibes podcast. And I was doing that with my friend Laura, who I'm still friends with. Um, but I'm so glad I had her there with me figuring all of this out because it was like anytime a roadblock came up, I just asked myself, like, is it worth it? Can I do this? And there was something deeper within me, that like calling within me that said, you know, yeah, you are supposed to do this. Like you're supposed to be um sharing channeled messages, and you're supposed to invite other people to talk about their story and just help people heal themselves and help people find that peace within themselves. And it was that reason why I was doing it that kept me going, because if my reason would have been something so simple as like, oh well, I just want to make money, that wouldn't have been enough. And don't get me wrong, like money's a great tool, but
It
it
doesn't stick.
right, it had to be deeper than that. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it had to be deeper than that. So, when you have clients who have these fears coming up and who start asking themselves, like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? What do you have them do? Like, how do you have them find that purpose within themselves?
Yes, I love this question because it does come up pretty often. And as an intuitive, I had this really strong, powerful download to that exact question when I was working with my very first client that I was working with her for 4 months. And I still remember, it's so funny when you have these like major shifts, you remember exactly where it happened, when it happened, what you were doing. So I remember, I was I was driving. I was in California. I was visiting, and I was listening to a Voxer message from her, and she was expressing, some real heavy doubts and some real density in her energy around what she was doing and her desires and what goals she was setting for herself, for her life, her passions, her work, her business. And she asked the question, it's like, how do I know if this is really what I'm supposed to be doing? And I find that so many of my clients and people who follow me who are in my audience ask that question. And the download that came to me that day was that you have to ask yourself, what if this thing that I'm working on, let's say, you're launching a brand new program, something you've never done before. Maybe you're a psychic medium, and up until now, you've just had single sessions with people, but now you want to start to teach your gifts to people who are interested in mediumship and who feel that calling within their hearts. So let's say you're launching a course for the very first time. And again, that can be very scary and very confronting because the ego really does not like newness in all different ways. So let's say that's the fear. And, what's coming up for this person is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? I feel so terrified all the time because, I've never experienced this before. And what I say to that is you have to imagine that, let's say your goal is to have 30 people purchase this course and their minds are freaking blown from it. And they start awakening their gifts and their powers, and they start to really gain that confidence as mediums themselves. Let's say everything that you want to happen with this happens, right? So you have 20 people, their lives are totally changed by this course that you've created, this soul baby that you've birthed into the world. How would you feel about what you're doing then? And something else that comes up for people is the lack of support in their inner circle of family and friends. Because when we awaken, a lot of the time, people around us are really not understanding that change that we're going through. And they either really pull back and don't ask questions like you'd want them to and don't seem interested, or they outright confront you and it's like, what are you doing? This sounds crazy. What do you mean, like, you have mediumship abilities? What, you talk to dead people? Like, that can happen in people's experience, and it can cause an inflation of those doubts and insecurities, right? But again, I ask them to envision what it would be like if everyone in their inner circle that they're afraid of their judgment, what if they were your biggest cheerleaders? How would you feel about what you're doing? And if they can come into that space, come into that emotion, really feel into that. And if the answer is, oh my gosh, I'd feel like a total rock star and I would be so in my purpose and so excited, I'd just be lit the F up, basically, then that's the answer, that what's holding them back really is those fears that can be overcome and will be overcome. But if the answer is, I don't know if that's really my path, then that's a perfect answer as well. And we can make adjustments accordingly. And I'll share a quick story. I started my business journey building an online platform, membership platform for yoga and meditation tutorials after I got certified to teach yoga.
Oh, cool.
And
I didn't know you were a yoga teacher.
yep, I got my
I'm a yoga
certification.
teacher.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And I still love the practice, and that experience of getting certified is one of my favorite experiences I've ever had. I actually went to Costa Rica and did like a 21-day
Nice.
immersion for it. It was beautiful. So what happened was I started building that business, and soon after, I'd say maybe a few months after, I just started to really fall out of alignment with that as my mission, and as a business, I started to fall out of love with it. And I got this instant message that it's so funny to say instant message. Anyway, I had this instant download from
I got an
divine.
IM from
Yes,
Spirit World.
an AIM. I got that like ding of the message. But so anyway, I got that download that this is no longer for you. Let somebody else take that space. And I asked myself that question without even realizing it. I was like, is this really exciting to me if I had all the results I was looking for? And I ended up falling in love with coaching soon after that. So it really is a matter of getting to know what you're truly excited and passionate about in that space and in that world of it all working out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's actually really interesting to hear your story, Chrissy, because I, a couple times, have tried to set foot into the coaching world.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I love coaching, but I think that the way coaching looks for me is different than the way it looks for a lot of people. So when I first started when I got back from India from doing my yoga teacher training, I really I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to teach yoga, and I had what kind of just felt like a crazy idea at the time of teaching yoga around the world, in as many places around the world
Ooh,
as I possibly could. And that was the only, like, I wouldn't have even called it a goal then. It was kind of just felt like a crazy idea to me, right? But I could see myself doing it and it felt exciting. And 6 months after I got back, one of the girls I went to school with asked me to teach yoga and do photography on a retreat that she was teaching in Greece.
oh my
And in
gosh,
that
of course.
right? And that same summer, my aunt up in Vermont asked me to teach yoga on a retreat that she was having up in the mountains. So it was kind of like I didn't even really I was so unattached
Bingo.
to yeah, I was so unattached to that goal that it kind of just happened. And then I came back and I realized, okay, I can't really oh no, this was even before I was teaching our retreats. I kind of realized, yoga isn't really much of a career path unless you are creative with it and unless you get
Mm,
creative and you find a way to make more money from it. Because if you're just teaching at studios, you're making anywhere from like $20 to $50 a class, and you've got to go around to all these different studios in a day if you really want to make that your full-time, like, bill
right.
paying job.
Burnout is real.
Seriously. So then I heard about coaching and I thought, oh, well, certainly I can do that. That feels like something I want to do. And that's where I experienced the burnout because I never tried the whole driving from studio to studio thing. I taught at max 3 studios at a time. But when I was trying to coach, it just felt like I was super attached to this outcome. I was forcing it, I was pushing it, and I wasn't letting myself be led. And I
Yes.
think that's also another way to know when what you're doing is right is if it feels like a pull instead of a push. And
I love that.
yeah, and I recently, actually not that long ago, I had a coaching program with my friend Adi. We did it in November of last year. And it was called Coming Home. And it was about coming home to yourself, coming home to your authentic self, your authentic sense of inner peace. And at the end of it, don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved working with these women. We had a group in the United States and we had a group in New Zealand, and we were all in the same calls
Ooh,
together. Yeah. And
wonderful.
right? It felt so beautiful. I actually met Adi on the retreat in Greece.
How
But
synchronistic.
right? I know. And I still love her to death. She's my friend. I would love to work with her again. But after that, I kind of had this download where it was like, you don't have to do things the way that you see other people doing things. You can still be a light worker and a healer and do things in your own way. And since then, I've been hosting workshops that are in person and doing more within my community and kind of getting back to the roots of why I started this podcast. And again, just being in that yin energy of letting myself be pulled,
Yes.
showing up for that 50%, and then for the other 50%, being in that playful energy of like, I'm ready, let's do this.
Yes.
And yeah, so
I find that, and I love that story. That's really a beautiful and powerful story of taking the experiences that you're having and discovering what to do with them based on inspiration or based on fear, right?
yes,
And for you, I love what you said about like it's more of a pull than a push.
yes,
And what I find is that you really can, and this is going to sound so cliche, but I embrace cliches with my whole heart. But you really can do whatever you want to do and be successful at it. And like you mentioned, it's being creative, and it's in that mindfulness and that awareness around what's coming up for you and what to do with it. So when it comes to leaping out of your comfort zone and taking actions, following your dreams, really bumping up against those edges of what you think is possible, it's really key to, in every moment, kind of take a snapshot of what's going on with your emotions, what's going on in your outer world, what are people reflecting back to you, what kind of results or lack of results are you seeing, and taking a moment to shift one way or the other towards more inspiration, towards more releasing of that fear, towards more of that pull energy, right? And, every single moment we have the opportunity to take this snapshot and make tweaks and adjustments accordingly, and to not be afraid to make little shifts or big shifts if we feel called to do so. But one of my biggest cautions with my clients and people who I come across who, love the work that I'm doing is to not take action based on fear. Again, so if you're not seeing the results, it doesn't mean that it's not working. It doesn't mean that your products and your services and your content isn't powerful. It just means that there's some shifting in your energy in order, right? Have you had similar experiences like that as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Like when the podcast was first started and it was still Vivid Vibes, our first few episodes, I tried not to pay too much attention to it, but it was like 8 listens,
Yep.
10 listens. And now it's like 50 listens, 60 listens per episode. So
Mm-hmm.
it's slowly but surely snowballing. But I will say that with the coaching experience, there was a lot of it where it felt like I was talking to nobody and I was seeing no return on all of the energy that I was putting into this. And now I see absolutely it was also kind of this misalignment with like me pushing to what I thought success looked like for me instead of listening to what success looked like for me. And whenever I decided to stop that push, there was this feeling of kind of like bitterness and defeat. Like I was defeated and like, oh, well,
That's
other
so
people,
relatable.
yeah, like other people can do this. How come I can't figure it out? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of realized, oh, that's because that's it's not that I can't achieve it. If I wanted to achieve it and if it were completely aligned for me, it would be coming to life. But I haven't slowed down for long enough and put my freaking cup of coffee down for long enough to realize I can't force my destiny into existence. I have to be still. I have to listen to the inner callings of my soul and remember that I am a unique being on this planet. We are all so unique. And even if someone else, excuse me, even if someone else's dream is so inspiring to us, it's never going to look exactly the same. So if I'm a light worker and which to anybody listening, I always say this whenever I say empath, light worker, starseed, any of that. We are all of those things if we choose to be. We are all those things when we come to this planet, and it is
Yes,
your choice whether or not you want to reconnect with that. Um,
totally agree.
yes, but like we are all so individual and unique, and like no matter how someone else is doing something, you can take that inspiration. You can say, wow, being a life coach and traveling the world and having location freedom seems so cool. But
Is it what you really want?
is it what you really want? And is the way they're doing it the way that you're going to do it? It might not be. You know what I mean? Like when I
Right.
took the time to be still and listen, then my structure of business completely changed.
Yeah, I find that a lot of the time people are almost afraid to have that silent time and to take that break and to really do that inner work. Me included, I've had those times as well where I was like, shouldn't I be doing something right now?
Yes.
And there's so much power when you are taking that time to journal out what you really want and discover what's hidden beneath those fears, you are doing something. It's just not necessarily looking the same as if you were writing an email to your email list. You are still being productive as a person who is prioritizing their soul growth and their business growth if they have a business. And something that I was talking about just the other day when it comes to the limiting belief that, quote unquote, the market is saturated or that I'll never stand out doing what I love. What I say to that is, it's not about what you're doing, it's about how you're doing it and who you are. There is literally nobody on this planet who has the same life experiences and the same heart and the same spiritual DNA, so to speak. And, there's just nobody who's exactly like you. And here's another beautiful cliche that I'll, express to your audience, but there's nobody like you. So that means whether you decide to jump into spiritual coaching or whether you really just want to share your work on social media and share your poetry or your spoken word, or maybe you want to start a podcast like Jada, or whatever it is that you feel inspired to do and to create, you will always stand out when you show up as yourself and give yourself permission and power to let it be easy and fun and allow yourself to stand out because you are unique and you are so individual.
Yes, love that. And like when we're showing up authentically, we're giving other people permission to show up authentically as themselves.
Exactly, exactly. And I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier when you were talking about making the shift from what was feeling dense and heavy for you with coaching into getting back to the roots of what really inspired you, and thus your podcast really starting to snowball and blow up in terms of the impact. What came to mind when I was listening to that, Jada, was we have to really be striking this balance between comfort, meaning what we are really excited about, what really lights us up, because it is so comfortable to be in that energy, right? It's so
Mhm.
comfortable to feel powerful and confident and excited about something. But also, I find we're striking this balance between comfort and discomfort, where we're taking those actions that do kind of scare us, that are bumping up against our edges, because we know it's expanding the results that we're stepping into. So for you, wanting to share these messages, that was your comfort, that was your excitement. But then starting the podcast or revamping and reimagining the podcast to where it is now, the Oracle Aura podcast, that probably was a little bit scary, and maybe you had some doubts about, like, well, what if this continues to just get 5 or 10 views per episode? And you have to decide, to stay the course with what you're inspired by, regardless of those obstacles that may or may not come up for you.
Absolutely. And also, I could tell it for me, I guess this conversation it keeps coming back to like knowing something is right for you. Like
Hmm.
whenever I was changing all the stuff for the podcast, I was going to keep it Vivid Vibes podcast. And then I searched Vivid Vibes on YouTube for some reason. Like, I don't know if it was to see if all the episodes were on there or what. But when I did that, I discovered that there was a Vivid Vibes music festival in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and when we started the podcast, there was nothing else called Vivid Vibes. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
yeah, so it was kind of a little, like it made my heart sink, and then it kinda made me realize, "Oh, shit, this is a way to, like, make this new again." You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like, completely make it mine,
Yes.
and it felt really good, and it felt really aligned, but as far as getting out of my comfort zone personally, there are things that I wanna do with this podcast that make me feel like, "Eh," but I know there'll be this huge growth happening, and not just for me, but for everybody listening, and that's so exciting, and just like you're saying, thinking about what if it all works out, when I think about what if that all works out, it excites the fuck out of me.
Exactly. That's how you
So
know.
that's how you know. So, whenever you have someone who is just completely full of doubt and they think, I don't think I can do this.
Hmm.
Um, we've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but when someone has, let's say this, when someone has a dream that's maybe bigger than what they think they can get to, when they catch themselves, they have the what and they have the why, but they catch themselves getting really caught up in how am I going to do this?
Right.
What do you say to them? Where do you go with that?
Yeah. So the first thing that I was going to say was that it can be really helpful for us to step out of our own experience and what our actions and what our passions mean for us. That's not to say that our passions aren't for us, they totally are. And we're meant to enjoy this life as much as possible along the roller coaster ride of what it means to be a human. But what I mean is sometimes it's really helpful to reframe and focus our attention on those that we're serving. So again, looking at like a grand scheme of things, somebody, let's go back to the psychic medium example with this course. It can be so easy to fall into those. I hesitate to say traps, but that's the only word that I'm coming up with. But those ego traps of thinking, well, what if nobody signs up and this will seem like a failure to everybody? What if this? What if that? And it all comes back to what it means for us. I really like to have my clients, and I like to do this for myself too. It's a self practice. Is to focus my attention outward on what I'm creating long term vision, so those little pitfalls that come about that can really scare us off the path of what we're meant for, all these big dreams, is to go back to the vision of what we're creating in this world. And my example, I always like to say how the world is really shifting right now into this space of consciousness where there's less trash on the beach and less people are flipping each other off in traffic. There's more yoga studios on every corner. More people are loving each other and embracing growth and not settling in their lives, right? We're really transitioning into more of that. I feel that deep in my soul. And I'm going to be a big part of that transition. That's one of my missions with my work. So that really tends to overpower all of those little insecurities and doubts and fears that I come across, on the daily, weekly basis with the big scary steps that I'm taking moving forward. So that's one thing. And then what you mentioned about maybe they have that why, maybe they are grounded in that bigger purpose for their work or, their passions. What to do when they're hung up on the how? That's a really, really great question because it's so natural and so common for us all to want to figure out the how. And we want to it's like we want to know and have the satisfaction of the puzzle put together and like glued together and put up on the wall as our masterpiece. We want to know all of that yesterday, but we really are, as humans, meant to take the pieces and put them together one by one. Does that make sense? So,
Absolutely.
so I really find that. Sorry, I was just distracted by something. I really find that um, getting out of that space of needing to know the how and just taking that next right step. Again, that's such a theme of this podcast. And I love that it's such a compliment to getting out of our comfort zones and taking scary action in line with our dreams. But dropping that need to have it all figured out, because in truth, absolutely nobody has everything figured out, and they're just brave enough to take that next right step and follow the breadcrumbs, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like being open to the hows kind of allows your dreams to even take bigger form than you could have imagined them to be.
Right. And I find that with the timeline of things that have happened in my life and just looking back on how everything unfolded. And I guess a great example of this is resigning from my day job and going full time as a coach. Back in February of 2020, I really energetically resigned. I got real fucking serious about resigning from my day job. It's just because I knew like the timing was really starting to be in my face of like, you're not meant to do this anymore. And like you said, it was that pull, that real extreme pull. So I made that energetic decision. But again, I had no idea what it was going to look like or when it was going to happen. I feel like a lot of my clients get hung up on the when as well because we want everything yesterday. But it really is in the journey. And I'm going to quickly divert to a quote. I don't know who said it, but it wasn't me. But the quote is, an unhappy journey does not lead to a happy destination. So we have to find a way to enjoy the journey and enjoy the process as much as possible as we go along without knowing the how or when things will unfold. So for me, I could have never, ever, ever, ever imagined that 7 months later, I would be finally resigning from my day job because certain things unfolded in my business and my energy expressed itself in certain new ways that I wasn't expecting. And that my husband and I would be moving across the country during a global freaking pandemic to Arizona, like way across the country, and starting this whole new life out here. And, he's got this new job that he's obsessed with. And everything just unfolded in such a way that I could have never dreamt up that happening myself, but it was really my commitment, my deep, big commitment to making it happen one way or the other and following the inspiration and working through any obstacles that came my way. It really, when it comes to your commitment to what you want, your desires, your dreams, your passions, your work, it really is in not caring about the how, not caring about the when, and not caring about any obstacles that may come about, as long as you're still obsessed with what you're doing and really inspired in your life, you find a way to work through all of that and get to the other side of it. And all of a sudden, you'll look back on your experience and be like, oh my gosh, this is my last day of my day job. I did it. I finally did it.
Yes, I love that. And I almost had like a not a backwards journey because nobody's journey is backwards, but I feel like a lot of the time in the coaching world, you hear people talking about, oh, they, started their coaching business as a side hustle and then they quit their day job and made coaching full time. I kind of did things the opposite way. So I was all in doing these workshops, doing group coaching programs, teaching yoga classes, and that in of itself felt like a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
but it was taking away from my podcast. I had no time to make these podcasts, and I almost was, for me, I was losing my purpose. My purpose was getting diluted in just trying to make enough income. And when I took the time to take a step back and be still and ask my soul what it really wanted, I realized, okay, I just want to pick one thing and focus on that. I just
Yes.
want to focus on my podcast. And in doing so, I decided to get a bridge job. And for me, that was getting out of my comfort zone because
Yes.
I do not like working. I mean, I don't want to just like out and say on my podcast that I don't like working for other people, but like who doesn't like, I mean, who doesn't prefer working for themselves? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, I mean, there's a yoga studio I freaking love working at. It's called Zen Massage and Yoga. If you're in Indian Rocks Beach, come
Woo!
check us out. It's amazing. But but I mean, I decided to drive for Uber because it was something that I can just do on my own. But I signed up and everything, and I thought, wow, how interesting that we're recording an episode about getting out of your comfort zone today. And I'm like, I don't know about taking my first Uber ride. Like, I'm kind of scared. And my goal was to do it today, to do my first Uber ride today.
Love
So,
that. And I love that that is your means to an end. And you're willing to have that be your source of resources and income right now in order to facilitate your bigger dream. And it's all based on trust. That's your underlying factor, I can only assume, is that you trust that having these sources of income for to facilitate you doing more work with your podcast and what you're passionate about, um, you know, it really is about that trust that this is temporary. This is what I'm doing right now. And it doesn't have to be something that I hate or something I'm resentful of. It may be a little uncomfortable, but this is all for the bigger purpose and the bigger mission. So I'm here for it, right? Would you say that's your energy?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. 100%. And you know what? Before I had this idea in my head, and this was for about a year, maybe even 2 years, I had this idea in my head that getting a bridge job. So, for anybody listening who hasn't heard the term bridge job before, a bridge job is just something that bridges the gap while you're starting a business, while you're learning how to make your business lucrative. It's a bridge. It helps you pay your bills while you're starting your business. So I had this idea in my head that having a bridge job was settling. And I'd heard it from another source, another coach actually, that whenever, we take a job that we don't really want, or we take a partner that we don't really want to be with, we're showing the universe, like, okay, this is good enough. And to some extent, I think that's true when it comes to love and things like that. But whenever you're deciding to fully show up for your business, and a part of that means getting a bridge job in order to be comfortable in the present moment while you're learning to get the pieces of your business together, there's no shame in that. So that really just comes back to the way that other people are doing things and
Yep,
taking a moment to let it marinate and say, is this my truth? Because I looked
exactly.
up to this person, I looked at what they were saying, and I thought, okay, that's the truth. But I never took a moment to ask myself, is this my truth? And I think that's really kind of a ironically, a universal truth in the spiritual community is that we all need to take a moment with any belief, any piece of advice or piece of information that we're given, and take a moment to marinate on it and say, is this my truth? Because whenever I look at it, like you're saying, I am, making that sacrifice, stepping into that little bit of discomfort because I know that it's what's necessary right now for me to truly put the energy and focus that I need to into letting this podcast reach its full potential.
Yes, the way I see it is that the universe is allowing things to unfold exactly as they're meant to based on your intentions. And again, it's not always going to look like the way we think it will. So maybe your initial intention was, I'm going to rebrand and reimagine this podcast, start sending out episodes, and immediately everything's going to explode, and I won't need that bridge job. But the universe, of course, sometimes has other plans, and it's all for our highest good. And what we need to be doing is to be open to these different opportunities and these different ways for resources to come to us. And for you, having these bridge jobs or these bridge opportunities is the perfect highest path for you to get to where you're going. And I'll tell a personal story as well. There's lots of different crazy, unexpected ways that resources have come into my life in order for me to get to where I want to go. So, whether it was investing in high level coaches or leaving my day job and, just expecting that things were going to work out, it's come in so many different ways. So, an unexpected bonus at my day job while I was still working it, or having that awareness that there's a retirement fund that I can pull from if I need to. Like, that's all sitting there and awaiting me if I need it. But the real key is being open to what I'm willing to do in order to make my dreams happen, and following the intuitive nudges. So for you, maybe that was, oh, this, Uber job definitely sounds like something I could do, going with it, and now you have those resources. So it may be different from what you initially thought, but it's still getting you to that same place. And I also wanted to say that I only consider it to be settling, whatever your situation is. I only consider it to be settling if there's really not much in your life that's lighting you up or inspiring you. So for you, you have these bridge jobs that are your resources, but you are actively working on this project and this podcast that lights you up and is serving the world, and it's really exciting to you. So I would only express and advise somebody to maybe make some changes if they, maybe tried to start a spiritual business and they got afraid of what that meant for them and they kind of went back into their comfort zone, and then they were just like living their lives on autopilot like they had always been doing. That is something that I find really needs to be shifted. There's got to be some sort of inspiration in your life, that reason for you to really feel like there's so much vibrancy and color in your life experience as a human. To me, that's really important for everybody to experience, is that color. And if you notice that you're living your life where things just feel very gray and you're just kind of, getting by, and, of course there may be seasons of that, but that should never be our baseline.
Absolutely. And if you are in that mode and you keep getting those little nudges that say, "Oh, there's got to be more to life than this," or "Man, I'm really unhappy with this job. I really don't like going here." Those aren't going to go away. And
Yes.
even if you find a way, to cope with them, and like for me, when I was in sales, I drank a lot on the weekends
Hmm.
because I was like, "Man, I fucking hate my job." So so by the time I got to the weekend, I was like, "Woo, party, I'm not at work." And and I was just stuck in that cycle, and I, you know, thanks to a mushroom trip, I quit
Woo.
that job. But but, you know, psilocybin or not, that message, that little gut feeling of there is more to my life than this is not going to go away. And you will never, ever, ever regret listening to that, even if it means doing some little, side project that you work on at home, even if it means writing a book in your Google Docs that nobody's going to read for another
Yep.
year.
Yep.
Like, just do something that gives you purpose. And if it's a little uncomfortable, that's okay. My mom has a quote that she says that I just love so much, and it's "Go out on a limb. That's where all the fruit is."
Ooh, that's beautiful. That's really
Yes.
beautiful. I love that.
Yes. Well, Chrissy, I think we've touched on a lot of good stuff in this episode.
Yes, I agree.
And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I guess the only thing that I would like to add is that, in this conversation, this overall umbrella conversation of getting out of your comfort zone and feeling safe to do so and supported to do so, I really find that there are two key elements of our life experience that we really need to nurture and prioritize. And that is being brave and being resilient. And one really can't exist without the other. Being brave means taking those actions that do feel potentially scary, but there's usually a lot of exhilaration on the flip side of that fear as well. So the bravery is taking those actions, experiencing newness, being adventurous in your life. That really is what inserts so much color into our experience as humans and as business owners, again, if you own a business. And the other thing, of course, the other piece, resiliency, that means that you're never giving up. And again, shifts may happen, like for me, from yoga and meditation teaching to coaching in a much different way. Those shifts may happen, but there literally is no plan B for me. I've taken a big black marker and I've crossed out plan B. I'm so far into this and I'm so devoted to my mission of this greater vision of the world that I know that we're all stepping into. And I know that I'm going to be a part of that. And I know that I'm going to be supported financially and, in all kinds of different ways. It really is in the bravery in taking those steps and the resiliency of knowing that um, you're never giving up on your dreams because you really do deserve it and we really do get to have it all. And it's just a matter of working with those fears and those doubts that come up, working with that uncomfortable emotion that comes with taking that step outside of our comfort zone and just making it happen no matter what. That really is what's going to lead to a life that you can look back on and think like, wow, this is exactly why I came here as a soul, to this ultimate soul school that is Earth and living as a human. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Chrissy. It's been
Thank you
really
for
nice
having
talking to
me.
you.
I agree.
All right. So, where can people find you online?
So I hang out most on, of course, the Instagrams, and my handle is at the Chrissy Dee, Dee. And I also have a free community that I just started not long ago that I'm really loving. And there's a lot of good vibes and high vibes and support that goes on in there. That's called Lightworkers Rising. So you can visit lightworkersrising.com and request to join. It's a really great time. We do like Zoom meet and greets, and it's just awesome. So those are my two favorite platforms. They're my platforms of choice, and that's where I hang out most. I'm very regularly on my stories, sharing inspiration, sharing guidance, sharing downloads. And so thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to come on and to share with your audience. And I really appreciate it, Jada.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening today, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram story, or pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a 5-star review. I would appreciate it so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Namaste.
Namaste.